days without moving?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Robbie Darcy, that was her situation.
On the 2020 Basalt Master Plan, I assume this is a Susan kickoff.
Yes, it is. And our goal is to have about a half an hour presentation from the consultants. Their part, like a half an hour, because we'll end at a 11:45. So really our goal is just to kind of ground us on the master plan, talk about the schedule, talk what's in the master plan, and then your job as the council is, are there any comments that you want to share at this time on the master plan draft? Two, any feedback on the schedule? We want to go spend a little bit of time on the schedule. And three, identify areas where the council would like to have more discussion. Because obviously we won't have time really to do that tonight. So this is a work session with the P&Z, so they're gonna participate. Also, I think both Bill and Rob Levitt, I know both of them would like to make a couple comments. I think the other thing I wanna say is a little bit different, and we didn't say it in the agenda report, but Trish Meyer and Tom Newland and the family is is here, and we're gonna, after the presentation, we're gonna allow them 5 minutes to speak. Trish has a medical issue, so she's not able to really come to another meeting, and she felt it was important for both the P&Z, Bernie, you're gonna sit by me, both the P&Z and the town council to hear some of the comments that they have on their property. So with that, I think everybody knows our consultants. We have today Dave Dixon and Wayne Freeman from, it's now known as Cushman Terrell, but what is that? Anyway.
Well, that's what she said, but still.
But we always call them CTA, so because that's who we contracted with, and Heather Henry from Connect One Design. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Oh, and you know that in terms of P&Z members, right now we have Bill Marin, Rob Levin, and Bertie Grower. I have yours right off.
Okay.
And Gino's coming in. And Gino, if you could sit by Pam.
No, I'm leaving. I'm just trying to get this set up, but.
Yes,
come sit over here.
Okay, so I'll
Is
turn
he
it
okay
over
with this?
to you, Wayne.
Okay, quick one here. We have a hearing application piece of equipment here, so if everybody up here could speak up. I don't have any idea if it will pick up out there, so that's not, I guess, anything I have any control over, but up here, please speak up.
Come up here.
No, I don't think so.
I'm not gonna be up there very long.
Wherever you are comfortable, sir. You might be able to see a little better over here. Not on the big screen.
So we're going to try and,
See what that looks like for you.
can you hear me? Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to try and make this as quick as possible. We've got a 30-minute presentation, just basically goes over the process from a high level, and then it gets into some detail about the preferred project areas, some of the projects that we've gone through, and tries to explain the entire process, the year-long process that the team has been going through. That includes our consultants, your staff, yourselves, and the public for the last year. Dave's going to give the majority of the presentation. From an engagement standpoint, we'd had an enormous amount of folks that came in, and Heather has led that effort, is going to give you the quick rundown. But our goal is to be done with this just a little after 5 o'clock and be able to give you 45 minutes of discussion time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave.
Susan, you want to talk schedule? Well, I'll just briefly talk about the schedule and maybe zoom back on it. But our goal on the schedule was for the council the now sitting council to adopt the master plan. So this was a schedule that we've been working on with the P&Z. We've sent out the referral draft of the master plan. We have another joint work session with the Roaring Fork Valley Regional Planning Commission in February, and this is with the P&Z, and the P&Z has another work session with the Pickett County P&Z. But what we have kind of done is every council meeting, we put a little agenda time for you guys to answer questions and talk about talk about the master plan. I think the one discussion item, generally if we have time at the end, is that this was assuming that we don't have any special council meetings, but we have reserved the room to have public hearings that are on just non-Tuesday. But the other kind of key piece on the schedule is, I don't know how many people were here back in 2007 when we adopted the plan, but typically the P&Z adopts the plan and then the town council. So Basalt is unique in that we're a charter government, and under the charter, the council adopts the plan and the P&Z adopts the plan. Last time, we had differences that we couldn't resolve, and so we ended up putting some asterisks in the plan and had sentences about what the P&Z said and sentences of what the council said. Our goal here was to eliminate that and have the council adopt it first, and then the P&Z adopt it afterwards. So with that, just because we're trying to move quickly, one other thing I was gonna say, we wanna go through the presentation and then ask questions after the Meyer family gives their presentation. So that's kinda how we have it set up, just because we wanna move fairly quickly. So Dave?
Thanks, everybody. Nice to see all of you. I think in some capacity or another, we've all met. And thanks for coming out for this work session. We have a ton of info to present, and I'll do my best to go through it as succinctly and as clearly as I can. As Susan said, the goals for this work session, any comments, any feedback on the schedule, and let's identify any areas where the council would like to have more discussion. So quick outline agenda of what I'd like to cover tonight. We'll have a summary of the public input from Heather, and Heather's team's done a really good job of kind of guiding that. And so she'll talk about a little bit about what that process was and some of the things we heard. I'll talk about the organization of the master plan, how it works. I'll go through the table of contents. We'll go through part 3, which is kind of the big implementation part of the plan. It starts with future land use. We'll focus on our 4 primary parcels, and then we'll talk a little bit more depth about a new Section 8 about green action steps and sustainability. And with that, I think we'll go right into the public input summary.
Well, the good news of the public input summary is that I don't think there's a face here that was not at least one event. I think mostly including in the crowd. So that's a great box to check off. So Susan calls this our placemat. There's one up on the wall. It's been up on the wall for a while now. This is our infographic that pretty much at a glance summarizes what you would see in the appendix that's over 200 pages of public input. So all of this started back in April. And it started with our first kickoff at the temporary, and then proceeded all the way through to our fall open house, where we continued to kind of break our own record of people that showed up at our bigger events. And I think we're in the neighborhood of about 140 people at that fall event. So what we've put together with this infographic is kind of the series of things that we moved through when you think about and talk about public outreach. So first was getting the word out. We worked with staff really closely, our interns, their intern, to make sure that we were being very broad in how we got the word out about all of our different input channels. So this was everything from neighborhood meetings that people got direct email invites, to our open houses, to the public survey, to the website that we've created, which is still live, still staying updated with the fall input information at letstalk.basalt.net. So that's been kind of a functioning website throughout, and one that we hope lives on for you all as a tool past the adoption of this master plan. So you can see under getting the word out where we did that, everything from message boards to newspaper ads to social media, et cetera. And then what we did, so this is a quick summary of what we call all the input channels. So how did we gain what you see in the little bubble that says 4,975? And by the way, that does not include the fall open house. So that is our input all the way through the summer. So those methods, what we did, again, many of you we saw at open houses. But I think we also saw a few surveys coming in. So we had open houses, the online survey, which was delivered through letstalk.basalt.net. We had neighborhood meetings. We had small group sessions, so those included things like visiting with the committees in town, to basically door to door, kind of pounding the pavement, that Wayne and Dave did over a series of short-term in-beds for, over the course of 4 months. So a lot of that was door to door. And then we had a few targeted events. So we targeted a youth workshop through the high school. There's about 40 students. In the summary in the appendix, you'll see that prior to that work session, we pretty much, both in the open houses and the online survey, we were completely missing a kind of 13 to 18-year-old. I mean, almost at zero. So we did this work session. It was about 40 students, and we had 30 that went online afterwards and responded. So we had to the entire online survey, and we had their feedback from that face-to-face event. So between that, and then we had a Spanish language speaking, sort of Spanish as first language speaking community picnic, and that was done on Emma Bridge. And that was about, numbers at the event were about 80, and then we had about 30 surveys that were completed from that, and those were paper surveys. So those were the kind of insertions that we made. Last would be the affordable housing work session. These insertions to really target some groups in the past that were underrepresented, and we really wanted to make sure had a voice in this particular master plan effort. So methods are things that's that we would have used any combination of those methods at any combination of our events. And so you guys saw a lot of those at the open houses, dot exercises, Post-it notes, things like that. But a lot of our small group sessions were just pages and pages of notes, frankly. Notes from the entire staff and then the consultant staff themselves. So all of those things were gathered together into what we call this 4,975 data points. So we've been asked a few times, what is a data point? So a data point was essentially a singular thought from a data source. So if it was a business meeting where Wayne and Dave had been working their way down Midland, let's say, or through Basalt, came across one of the business owners, say, hey, can we sit down for half an hour? And they would talk about Basalt. What are you struggling with? What's going well? What can we think about in the future? And all those probing questions. Someone would just be giving their feedback, and you might write down a sentence that had a particular statement, and then you might talk about that for a while. Well, that one sentence was essentially the data point, okay? And so pages and pages of those. And then we had things like the open houses, where dot surveys and things like that were a person giving a particular vote multiple times at different exercises in that event. So that would be considered a data point. We had storytelling cards. So when someone answered a question, whether they answered with 1 word or 10 words, that would be 1 data point. Our survey itself, on the online survey, each survey completed, we considered as 1 data point. Really, if we had taken 135 people that responded to that and all of the questions, then it would have really thrown, because I think we capped out, probably 30 questions at least in that survey. So those we just counted 1 time. So that kind of gives you a sense of all the different places where we would hear very robust information, and that might be a data point, or we might hear just kind of, here's my singular vote, and that was a data point. So that's how we've kind of captured all of those. Lastly, what we heard. Once all of that information was gathered together, we started to put all of that information into the themes that we had been asking people about. So your mobility, your economics, your land use, things like that. And so we put those into big giant buckets. And I think we can go to the next slide. I don't have. We've gone past that. Okay. So then this was the last matrix that essentially, we did 2 things with that. One, we did a top 10, and that's on the placemat you just saw. So that is the top 10 things, top 10 vote getters, okay? That's on the top of that list. The rest of this is all the categories mixed together, whether it was mobility or land use, et cetera, ranked pretty much on the left-hand side in green from, what got the most data points or the most references, all the way to the bottom right, which is what was mentioned the fewest times, okay? In the final appendix, we also did a top 10 for each category. So what were the top 10 mobility things that people talked about? What were the top 10 economic things? So then is the big, like, so what? So at the very end of this, we have translated all of that into what you see in the actual master plan in a whole number of places, starting at the very top with the vision statement, then the goals and objectives, and then really as you move into the heart of the plan, and then finally the projects themselves. If you remember, we did a really great ranking exercise. All of that came out of these 5,000 data points. What were people's thoughts, information? And so that's where then you see that information. And while a person might not be able to go in and see their comment in the master plan, they should see this kind of direct consensus-based correlation between what rose to the top in the public input and what you would see in the master plan. So I think that was the end of my slide.
Can I ask a quick question? Did you already tell us, or did you know how the demographics split out as far as like age, neighborhoods?
So, great question. From certain channels, we do. So from the open houses, we do. If you remember, we did a pin board. So from that, we have both their kind of geolocation and their age group. From the online survey, we do. Other channels, like for instance, committee groups, we didn't necessarily gather their demographic data or their age categories, things like that. From neighborhood meetings, from some of the business sessions, we didn't. So from the top 2 channels, we have demographics.
Okay, so is there a way that I could go look at that, or is it online?
So that's all in the appendix, and
Okay.
in the executive summary of the appendix, you'll see any of the channels that we have the demographic data for, it's included in. So that would be out of Let's Talk and primarily out of the open houses. You will see the spreadsheet. And we have a bell curve, basically. And the bell curve, you know, starts getting bigger around 40 plus, and then starts to, you know, gets really big right in there, and then starts to get smaller around 65. So it kind of goes like this, and that's where our bell curve was,
Gotcha.
which is pretty typical.
And where can we find this? It's in the appendix, the public survey results. It's in what's available. It's called page XX, and it's unavailable.
So I'm not sure
we
if
got it to work, so if you go to the, did it break? Should, not this information, yeah, what you, no, it's on a separate one. So it's a separate link on, we'll take it back, at the end, I'll circle back and show you
Okay.
what that one is.
Thanks.
And Heather, we're not gonna take normally questions, but she's got a trustee meeting today, so she's gonna be leaving, so.
But hopefully 5:45.
Oh.
You guys will be done with it. As long as I can make the car.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, quickly on background and process, where we're at, where we've been, and then we'll talk a lot about how we turned all that public input information to the plan. So this is just a diagram that goes from project kickoff in March through April, and the number of open houses. These are our phases. Announce, gather, vision, and then design and implementation. So we're through that through November. Our open house was in November. We're right about here at this work session, and then we're looking for approval in March. So that's the plan right now. We went over the schedule earlier. We could talk about that in a little bit. Okay, how's the plan organized? That's the first thing we kind of want to talk about. I'll go through the table of contents. It's a 3-part plan. Part 1's introduction. It's got kind of the executive summaries, the motivations behind this plan, how we got to this point in time. And then the section 2, background and input, summarizes the public input and all the other inputs that go into the plan, and where you can find the key information you're looking for to kind of build that motivation of why we need a plan right now for future planning efforts. They can look back at that section and say, all right, that's what was going on in 2020. Part 2, we call it the planning framework. That's where we're going. We start going from broad to specific. Really, the whole plan goes from broad to specific. And so we start with vision, which is kind of your broadest mission-driven statement. That informs the plan elements, and I'll talk about those in a second. There's 8 themes that we've organized this plan around. And then goals and objectives follow that, and then from there it gets more specific, and that's what part 3 is, your implementation. How do we use all those guiding statements and turn it into things that we can use at a planning level. And that's future land use, these primary and key parcels we'll talk about, a number of other sections, and then the appendix is where a lot of information is stored. We moved a ton of information to the appendix. It's hundreds of pages long, and it provides all the background you need to understand what the plan's saying. I mentioned the planning framework. So in the past, traditionally planning, they break out categories like transportation and economics and demographics. That's kind of an old-fashioned way of doing it. So what we did is we looked at, as we were receiving input from the public and from stakeholders, we looked at how do we get this down to eight themes that are kind of value-oriented or value-based. What is the public value? What is the business community value? We use that as our organizing framework. And so you'll see some of these: authentic places and destinations, and affordable and inclusive living, people and community character. We set it up so a project can apply to a number of these instead of just strictly one thing, one transportation-oriented project. That really you're looking at this thing holistically. It's a comprehensive plan. So we wanted to make sure that carried through. And this is how the goals and objectives are organized. Each one of these has several goals, and each goal has several objectives. We wanted to point out that really when we were developing these, we looked at all the recent efforts that have been going on, including the strategic framework, which was a big informant for how we came up with these 8. You had 4 action areas in the strategic framework. We have 8 themes because with planning we have to get a little bit more specific in some places. So that's a back and forth that occurred in the early part of plan making. So that was kind of a big deal for this plan. We don't have much time, so I wanted to focus on part 3, which is your implementation. It's the longest, most robust piece of your plan, and it has all the functional elements that your staff and you need as leaders to make decisions on things in the future. So there's 5 parts to that: the future land use map and section, which addresses certain parts of the community as having unique circumstances, and it applies land uses to places of potential change. Primary and key parcels, that takes future land use a step further by thinking a little bit deeper about how physical planning and buildings and streets might work on certain areas that we know are kind of are changing or may change sometime in the future. It's kind of what we were tasked with, making an aspirational plan, so we went further than normal, which is just future land use planning, and really thought these things out, embedded it with the public. A list of projects that came from a number of sources, came from direct public input, or talking with your public works, or a number of places. We translated that directly back to what we heard from the public, and it's really kind of a really cool part of this plan. And then section 9 was really important. We isolated the sustainability and resiliency and the efforts and the actions that you could do to kind of reach your ultimate vision by making its own section, and we call it Green Action Steps in Sustainability, and that's been circulated amongst the sustainability leaders in the community, and it's got direct action items for now and for the future. And then typologies, which is another really great tool for everybody to use to guide design decision making on projects. So we'll go through the future land use map really quick. It's important to note that some of the numbers you'll see here are for the 3-mile planning area, which is enabled in state law for the town to consider planning up to 3 miles outside of its boundaries. This is really only note on this is what you see online will be updated to reflect this map. The map that's on there right now, I think, does not have existing land use, but this one does have existing land use, so you can understand what committed land uses are and what the future land uses are. We'll zoom in a little bit. This is the future land use map for East Basalt. Just a couple things to note. This is not a new tool. It's been in the planning, as you probably all know, since the 2007 plan, and has been amended periodically. What you'll see on here is the urban growth boundary, municipal boundaries, and I've labeled our key and primary parcels. Some of this remains from the previous master planning efforts and from amended master planning efforts. A couple things to note. You'll see the R-Town planning area here. We are using what came out of the R-Town planning effort sub-area plan as the future land use map. This plan recognizes that as the future land use for that particular area. A couple other things you'll note. There's a new future land use in this particular plan, and it's called MUI, or EMUI if it's in the eligible area. It's mixed use industrial. It's essentially a more sophisticated version of your light industrial land use that you have now. We have a slightly different vision for some of the places where that land use is applied, so we wanted to make sure we had a custom, or at least a valuable land use with certain characteristics that reflected what we heard from folks out there. As far as West Basalt, the kind of new updates here are we have the town urban growth boundary, and we also have the El Jebel urban growth boundary, which was introduced here. So El Jebel has some specific circumstances. It's an interjurisdictional area. The Mid-Valley Community Plan from Eagle County had its land use maps, so we kind of addressed that. We considered that, and we have some language in there that supports that at this time unless something changes. And the town can revisit some of the things that are happening in El Jebel, but we wanted to make sure the plans were coordinated to some extent. And we applied the EMUI land use up here. This is the build-out future land use table. So this is all those colors that you saw in the 3 mile area have target densities associated with them, and it's calculated based on how much acreage is in that particular area. So this is kind of a lot of stuff, but I'll just point out existing where we're at right now, about 1754 units. There's unbuilt but approved units, about 600 in places like Stotts Mill and other places. Those are actually approved. They're reflected in the plan, but they're not built yet. Based on just the future land uses and excluding our key and primary parcels, that's that density target. Based on the maximum range of those ranges is 488 units. With our key parcels,
Can I just get a clarification?
Sure.
So the 599 is approved unbuilt, and the 488 is what?
So that's, if you apply a density target to an acreage, say it's 11 units per acre, that's just how the future land use is calculated out to turn acres into units.
So it's just like zoning.
Yes.
Yeah, as far as, except there's a range of densities.
Right, but I mean, it's not really anything but zoning. There's no approvals there, it's.
Exactly. It's theoretical, right, in some ways. It's not proposed, it's just what's in the plan as the vision. So we have density ranges with our primary parcels. We presented several scenarios to the public. There was less dense and more dense, so this is reflected in lower density units here and the higher density units here. So you'll see some of our scenarios are denser and some are less, and so that's just what that means. And then with working with P&Z through the work sessions over the past several months, we've kind of come up with something kind of in the middle. And that's what you can see here as far as the lower end of that density range with everything the plan says right now is about this number. The higher is about this number, and you can see this one's in between. The asterisk here is because if you take this less this, it's 1581. It's not, this includes existing, I guess is the point, it includes existing units as well.
And I think the other important piece of this is to recognize that this is the 3 mile planning area, so we're going from about Old Snowmass down into Garfield County. So it is it's a pretty big area. So a lot of those total committed, approved, unbuilt units, a lot of those are not in the town.
Okay, and in that 3,300 or 31 or 35, how many acres is that
It's a lot,
approximately?
several hundred.
I'd have to get back to
Can't
you.
tell you exactly, but it's a lot.
Just a swag.
Well, it's,
'Cause I have
the
no
3 mile
idea.
planning area is like 9 miles by 10 miles, so if you did your math, generally,
But you gotta take out what's already here.
Right,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so,
We'd have to, have to calculate in GIS, I think.
And currently built units is 4,100?
I think it's less than that.
The existing number of dwelling units is 1754.
That's already built or already planned?
Built.
That's built.
on the ground, okay.
So there's 754 units in the 3 mile planning area?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we'll go into the next chapter, or the next section of that chapter, which is primary parcels, and the way we approach them in the document. So we have kind of four subheadings for each one of these parcels. There's 4 primary parcels and there's 5 key parcels. We started with 10 and we decided that there are 4 that are really, really important to dig deeper into. How we address that, we started with the background. Why did we dig deeper for this particular parcel? We pointed directly at the public input. What did we hear about this parcel? We tested and had voting on these parcels several times, and I'll show you that in a minute. What did we hear? How did we use Open House 3 to get to some early input, and how do we use Open House 4 to test some of these options? And then we describe what each concept says. It's a physical planning exercise, and it illustrates some of the ideas here. What do we present and why? We describe this in the plan. What has to happen, no matter the option. So we have, public has voted on some, and some have risen above the others, but there are certain things, for example, building a trail or a connectivity project or something that have to happen based on the public input, no matter what the options are. So some of these improvements are, do not matter which option ultimately is preferred. And then we have the elements of each one. An important piece of this is what must occur for each one of these to actually happen. And so there's some things like infrastructure improvements that need to be made, and there's some really serious investments in some of them, and there's less so in others. And there's physical constraints like floodplain or slope or other things that we have to consider when you're just thinking about development. We're not proposing these as designs. These sites will be designed by whoever designs them, but it's the public vision. Just want to make that evident. This is what we heard from the public, and as the process went on, some of these things changed, and we came up with new ideas. So the public input, how do we do it? Really at Open House 3 and 4, we created some devices here, some survey instruments, essentially. At Open House 3, we had 10 of these boards, some of you might have been there, with just the aerial of the site, some ideas, some kind of basic land use characteristics on the left, some of the things that we've been hearing, and on the right, we had a survey. It was a dot exercise, so people could place dots on whichever kind of thing they preferred over others. And then we had open comments here, and people could provide comments on these things in any number of ways. So we kind of went back, took all that information, and took what we were hearing in the online surveys, and we started thinking about these. These are examples from the Clark's Basalt Center Circle parcel. And then in Open House 4, which many of you were at, we had these things set up, and we had people provide comment on them, and we had another voting exercise where people had chips they dropped into the bucket for whichever. Say there's 3 buckets for Clark's, whichever one they preferred, they could vote on, and we'll talk a little bit about how those ended up. So you can see here. So we tested it. We were the consulting team and staff were there to help facilitate discussion. So it was really great. We got to have one-on-one discussion with people, kind of explain some of the things, some of the details. So it wasn't just voting without information. So we think we got some really good information back. I thought it was a really neat way to do it. Here's where those places are. In red are our four primary parcels. The Clark's site, Jack and Stott, south side between the high school and along Southside Drive, and the Myers property. Green, we had our 5 others, which you can see there. Just kind of more important to note where these things sit. They're either right in the middle or right outside, and obviously things like trails and connectivity are going to become important once you start thinking about what to happen here. These things provide major connectivity improvements that could really help mobility in your town. So we really wanted to put that together. There's a lot of them close to the river, so it was important to consider what the river means and how buildings might interact, or open space interacts with that. So here's some of the results of the voting. We had in-person voting at Open House 4, as I just explained, and then we had an online poll that was up for several days, so that people could, if they didn't feel like they had enough information, then go online, get more information, and then vote online. And so these are just the results. So there's some that emerge. I think the important thing here is all the options receive some level of public support. Clark's, this option C, I'll show you here in a minute, received probably the strongest voting support from the public. Generally the rest of them, there was, some kind of evenness between them, and you can just you can see those.
And quick question
Sure.
on that, because this will come up multiple times, I imagine. Maybe now you can nip it. Why was there not the option of neither?
Well, we did have that option. We expanded that option
Online. Yeah.
And you didn't have to use your chip, and the box that had the sticky note was if you didn't vote for either one. Why?
Okay.
Yeah.
So that they couldn't just do a no vote with kind of no feedback.
Mhm.
They had to
reflected in the number of chips received per, because we had a certain number of people, they all had the same amount of chips. Some,
Hey, Dave,
Yep.
we should probably end by a quarter after, because we have
Sure.
the Myers to talk for 5 minutes.
Absolutely,
We wanna
yes.
make sure the
Okay.
council talks.
I'll go through these really quick, so excuse me for how fast I'm gonna talk here, but, so for Southside, just these are some of the high level, results of some of that. So public had a slight preference for the.
And just as a reminder, A was usually the less dense.
Yes,
And B was the more dense, and then when you got to Clark's, as you moved A, B, C was the most dense.
right. So Southside, there was some really good discussion at the open house for, public had a slight preference for option A. At P and Z, I think the important note is that we kind of have to go with the less dense option based on the traffic study and other things that were done and the transportation issues. So you kind of have to go, you have to at this point say option A until those transportation problems get solved, which really refers to the underpass. With Jadwin Stott, again in work sessions with P and Z, we determined a hybrid option C was the outcome, the ultimate outcome at this point. It has more open space than option B, which again, this might sound, I'll go through these really quick, but just to get these out there. Option B is the more dense option, but it has the same number of units, and it has a smaller amount of community facility, which is public serving, public municipal shops, offices, or anything civic kind of oriented.
And this wasn't unanimous.
Right. With Myers property, option A was the I believe it was preferred option. So it was increased community facility, again,
Option A was actually just the 2007 master plan
Right.
as it was.
as it was,
And then
correct.
the P and Z started playing with it a little bit, so their first discussion was this option A, which was kind of a modified option A.
Right, yeah, modified, so it's an
Yeah.
option C. We kept the same amount of footprint for residential uses as far as horizontal land uses, but went with the medium density, and really the discussion was about, let's find a way to provide some kind of smaller units, starter home type of land use here. That's the ultimate vision. You know, this is a good spot for that kind of housing use. There's a large buffer between the Elk Run neighborhood and existing neighborhoods. We expanded it a little bit and expanded a little bit of community facility. With Clark's, all three options still at this point remain valid. Option C had the most public votes, as I mentioned. I think the point here is it's made, this option C is a very, very involved option, and it's made a lot easier with public investment, but it's not necessary to have a huge amount. Any of the options really, but that's kind of the take home from C. Okay, so I'll go through these really quick just to point out, I really want to get to the discussion. So with Southside, this is the less dense option. It's a live-work with a mixture of housing and a mixture of space dedicated for commercial uses that are job generating, so as to adjust the inflow, outflow, and commuting patterns of the town. It's been kind of a mission of planning for a while, is to create jobs where they kind of currently exist in Southside. Option B is essentially the same thing with just a little bit more intensity, a little bit more square footage for commercial, a few more units, and both have an affordable housing component as an anchor, and then proposed increased connectivity enhancements, and then the underpass here. Jadwin Stott, these are the two we presented to the public and got feedback on from the public. This is what we're called a residential anchor with a less dense residential attached single-family type of vision with short-term rental, which is in this case depicted by cabins and much of the site dedicated for open space, not only because of physical constraints, but because that's what we've heard generally throughout. Option B is a little bit denser of an option with attached multifamily, mixed-use component here, and then a civic facility, which everybody got, I think, really excited about the critical mass of the library and the post office being civic uses here, and we could have an extension of that with some kind of recreational component. That was the kind of the idea from the public that we heard from option B. Ultimately, option C, through the work sessions with P&Z, became a hybrid. Still much of the space dedicated to open space, which could have trails and other amenities, of course. The dog leg piece kind of over here is dedicated open space with the same amount of units as option B. This is envisioned as more of a live-work, similar to South Side type of land use, and this has been pulled towards this. And this is what's reflected in the future land use map right now. So it's a compact, kind of mixed-use, walkable extension of your old town. Because the location near transit and transit-oriented development, that's kind of what motivated some of that thinking. This Myers property, this is the existing or the 2007 master plan, pretty much as it is. The second option is kind of a future planning option that has rural residential and ultimately exploring the idea with the public of expanding the urban growth boundary. That was the motivation about kind of how, in the future and maybe the far future, what does that look like? And then after the work sessions, we came up with this option C, which dedicates the same amount of footprint for residential, but for medium density starter home type of thing. All these have a increased connectivity to public lands at some point or another through here. Okay, Clark's, obviously the most involved, the most spoken of is from the public as far as a redevelopment site. Option A, this represents a situation where the existing ownership and parcel lines and ownership lines remain, and redevelopment occurs on the market site, and some redevelopment occurs elsewhere, but largely the site is as is with ownership lines. All three of the ideas for Clark's, the vision for Clark's to have a better connection through to Midland Avenue. So that's really important to the public. We came up a lot. This is the second one, which is maybe like a slightly more intense version of A. You can go from A to B with more obviously intense redevelopment here. If it doesn't look like it, I promise you these are set back about 70 feet off the river's edge. So it's really kind of set back really far to maintain open space and trails and other things that we heard from the public in this area. C is kind of a similar mix of uses, but we introduced the idea of a public parking garage with mixed uses in it. Both B and C, this street frontage is active frontage with food and beverage. That is almost mirrored from what's happening on the other side. All of these passageways line up, and so we wanted to have a nice along two rivers of mixed use, urban feeling idea here. And also with B and C, you'll see that we wanted to show a dedicated amenity for whether it's an outdoor patio plaza, where hospitality with this hotel idea being on the river can spill out, and certain things can perhaps occur there. Quickly into the projects, we also came up with a list of projects as I discussed earlier. We had the public prioritize those and add value to those in Open House 4, as many of you saw. So we created these buckets, which represented theoretical cost ranges for projects, and we put a number of projects into each. We gave people stickers that represented money, and they applied value to these so that we can understand where everybody's heart was as far as the big ticket items and the small ticket items. So that was really kind of a really interesting way for us to vet some of these projects that we heard. Here's the top ones from the online and in-person voting. You can read through these. The really neat part about this to us is that the top three here that you have reflected what we've heard overall from everybody about your top three kind of issues. So, number one, build a significant affordable housing project. That won by a landslide. So people obviously are supportive of investment in that particular topic. Connector shuttle, really addressing connectivity between Old Town and Willits. That was the second most highest vote getter. And then 3, make a capital investment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, something significant. So 1, 2, and 3, there's kind of your top 3 right there. And I think we've heard that throughout the process. We also had an opportunity for folks to add whatever projects they thought was important to them. So we did receive some particularly upgrades, year-round use, new facilities, solar power, and things like that. All right, lastly, we have a section 9 which focuses on green action steps and sustainability. Specifically, how do we get to these? What does greenhouse gas emission reduction projects mean? And this has been addressed and kind of vetted by Green Team and others. So this pulls that out specifically. The topics of discussion are, what are the steps to meeting these goals? What are other sustainability sectors that we haven't considered before? Resiliency, what are resiliency projects? And what the actual projects themselves and the next steps to address these are outlined in the plan. So that's, yes.
Quick question, I know we're gonna move on. On these big ticket items, did you anywhere tie in, would you vote yes, to tax yourself to pay for it?
So the question as phrased on the top of the buckets basically said, consider this public money.
Okay,
And that could happen in various ways. It might be via a grant, it might be public-private kind of partnership, it might be that it's coming out of, the general fund. So we kind of, I don't remember the exact phrase, but it was not a direct correlation to would you tax yourself to do this project.
I mean.
It was clear that it was like public money in some form.
Okay, I guess I should ask that differently. There's a difference between saying, yes, the town could use general fund money versus this is so much money that it's gonna be on the ballot and I'll have to make a decision about how important it is to me. That kind of question, I think that's super necessary when you start talking about creating bus systems and large investments in affordable housing kind of thing, so. Just FYI, it's not the same as saying, do you mind if Ryan Mahoney writes a check? That's not the same.
So that's all the slides
So that was our presentation, and after we do the Meyer family, then I wanted to give an opportunity for the P and Z just to add, anything that they wanted. But we've got like a half an hour left.
Could we let the Meyer family
Yeah.
sit up here for a minute
Yeah.
when
And
they speak?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
just one thing, I think just given the time frame, we wanted to let them come up and speak and say their piece with regard to, reactions on the master plan, but probably don't have time to delve into dialogue specifically on any
Thank you.
given parcel
Right.
there, so we
Like
can hear them
comments
out and
not
take
on
it
the
into
agenda kind of thing.
consideration, yeah.
could you guys let Mrs. Meyer sit up at the?
Thank you for making time.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
How's your winter?
Well, the shop burnt down, a major building on a ranch, so.
Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln kind of question?
Go ahead, Trish.
Okay, I'll start. So I'm Trish Meyer, and I just wanted to give a little background and some perspective from our viewpoint. The Meyer Ranch has been in our family since Guido Meyer Sr. bought it in 1961, and a few years later, he was offered an opportunity to put in a trailer park to house the workers who were building Root Eye Dam. So instead, he kept it green, and it's been an ag in our family for the last 60 years, and we feel we've been good stewards of the land. Meanwhile, well, here's 1960, and meanwhile, we have been surrounded on these two sides by Elk Run, and on this side by the flagpole annexation of the Roaring Fork Club, and its continuing development along here now even.
We'll leave this here for you to take a look at. I think it's really cool because it shows every 20 years how development has been encroaching on the ranch until the final part here where you see subdivisions both on the east and development of the Roaring Fork Club on the west. So just interesting to see how things have happened.
And in that time, we've given up land for the water tank, for the highway realignment, the bike path, Fisherman's Park, and the river access. So we've already given up 40 acres for public use. And 40 acres, okay? So for 30 years, my late husband Guido tried to work with the town to formulate a future for the ranch through various projects. For example, many years ago, he approached the town with a wonderful plan for a residential community centered around ecological sustainable landscapes and using the land in an organic and natural way based on a very successful model. He was told to wait for the upcoming master plan and was led to believe his plan for a sustainable community would be included. Instead, the urban growth boundary became this arbitrary line in space. And the project that we wanted to do was now out of the new urban growth boundary. Ours would have used the land a little bit more naturally. So due to this, that was decided on when the process was running out of time and money, as we were told this by a town official. So due to this arbitrary line in space that was drawn for the convenience and expediency of completing the master plan, our use of our land was constrained in an unnatural way, and as I said, we could no longer proceed with this plan. And so for me, knowing that how this urban growth boundary was created, I don't see why it's so set in stone. There were many other attempts to work with the town to do something with our property, such as the collaboration with the Roaring Fork Club, and even a few years ago with the proposal initiated by previous town manager Mike Scanlon. So now here we are with public forums for people to decide what we are allowed to do with our property. At the last open house, people were given poker chips to choose what to do with our land. And this isn't a game to us. This is our home, and these are our lives and our future. And I would like to point out that no one deciding our fate with poker chips is paying any of the taxes or the considerable ranch expenses and upkeep. The Meyer family input into this proposed master plan consisted of an hour-and-a-half meeting with planners and a couple of phone calls. Despite our efforts to be more involved, we received the options not very long before they were presented to the public, and neither of the options that were presented to the public represented what we had proposed. So this roller coaster has gone on for more than a generation now. Our family made a decision going into this process that we were willing to work with the town one final time to try to create a solution before pursuing other options. We need a financially sustainable plan to keep this land in agricultural use, which is also in line with the wishes of the community. Our agricultural operation is not sustainable as is, and our efforts to create an income stream have been continually blocked by the town's and the county's land restrictions. Our future has been in limbo for many years now, and our children are now adults. Evidence. They have been unable to build homes on the ranch, even though we have 180 acres. 60 acres, or 1/3 of the ranch, is in the town of Basalt in Eagle County due to the annexation for the water tank. That all went with it. So this land has basically been sterilized for development or even for family residences, and we've not been able to use it because it's zoned as developing resources, which Susan and I have talked about before. We would like to work with towards a mutually beneficial agreement. If we can create an acceptable joint plan, our family can continue to run the ranch, and since we continue to hope, we hope to continue living here, we would take good care of the land, which is not always the case in development. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for coming in. We will take your comments into
And
consideration.
we do have some other issues we'd like to discuss with you, or just make known, and I'll just touch on one of them briefly, and that's the trail. We're concerned about the trail through the ranch for several reasons. There's impacts to agriculture. Where the trail wants to go is, according to the master plan map, is right where the cattle congregate. It's kind of their bedroom, if you will. And they like to stay there and graze and then move up the hillside. So it's going to impact agricultural work on the ranch. It also has wildlife impacts. There's critical wildlife habitat up on that hillside, and there's already a trail in place going through that critical habitat at the Albany Kittle Trailhead. So this would add another one through that, which I'm not an expert, but I don't think it bodes very well for the deer and elk. There's also critical habitat for wild turkey and black bear up there as well. So there's also privacy impacts, and not just with the Myers, although they are dealing with trespassing now, and I'm sure trespassing will occur even more if a trail's put through there. And also liability issues with public use of the ranch, whether on the designated trail or as a result of trespass, are concerns. But there's also impacts to the privacy and, I don't know, solitude of the cemetery. If you look at how that trail lays out, the cemetery is essentially going to become a trailhead. And, you know, people go to cemeteries to reminisce about the people that are buried there and try to be for a quiet place. And I just don't see a trail as compatible with that use. So from the ranch's viewpoint, the town seems to be prioritizing human convenience really over wildlife preservation and the perpetuation of a historical agricultural operation with this trail. And we'd like you to consider siding with nature instead of people this time and remove the trail from the master plan. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
And your family too. Thank you. Okay, do we want planning commissioners?
Yeah, Bill, do you want to add anything, any other P&Z members?
Yeah, I wanted to make some comments, and I want some of the other P&Z members to be able to make comments as well. I want everyone to think that we're not necessarily all on the same page with this, but we're similar of mind about it. But what I'm going to say are my personal comments. First off, I really like where we are. I think we've done a really great job with the public outreach component of this, and to really divine where the community is at this place. I don't think the last couple times we did this, we really went nearly as far as that. So we have a greater sense of where the community is and how they're feeling about it. I think it's a lot more inclusive than it ever has been. And, but I do have a couple comments about the final part of this, and this is not to criticize CTA and the consultant team about what they did, but I think we could look at this in a way and through a lens of how we use the information that we got. The plan is really great as to figuring out where we want to go. We know that. But it's not quite as good, and we were looking for something as a visionary statement as to how we get there. And I think really at the end of the day that has to come from us as boards, how we get there, and in a way that's acceptable to all of us to craft a document that we can live with for the next 10 years. You know, there's a lot of nice ideas in there, but a lot of them are pretty standard planning ideas that involve just writing checks. And you know, we're a small town, and writing checks is not really what we're able to do a lot of the time. So, you know, I think we should, as a couple boards, think about certain things that are other than writing checks. Ideas like, you know, with when you're talking about environmental or green construction, how we get there. We've always had parts of our code that are very prescriptive about how you do these things, and I think if we really want to do that and get somewhere, we need to have some sort of reciprocal part of this, a carrot part of our code and master plan, you know, so incentives for that sort of thing. You know, if this is something we really want, how much do we mean it? And do we put that as part of our code? We look at other different ways of writing codes, like do we want to do form-based codes? Do we want to explore that? Though that's kind of a very technical planning thing, but it's a very different way of doing it. Do we want to approach our code in a very different way? And I think that's one thing we want to, between now and March, at least make some statements about. Do we want to, the master plan makes some statements about urban redevelopment authorities and stuff, and that's, I think, personally, I think is a great idea and something we could explore. But do we want to expand that further into things like TIFs and other, you know, bond-based things where it doesn't really cost us much other than our bonding ability, but it can really be used as an incentive for getting the type of development we really want. And using those sort of tools to guide what's gonna happen into the direction that we as a community have decided we wanna go. That's my thoughts. Rob, do you have any thoughts you wanna add to this?
Oh, sure, a few, I guess. You know, we've had discussions about my ranch, but I wish we had spoken with you guys through the process, because having that history, I think would have been really helpful in forming our discussions. So I'm sorry we just heard it at this point in the process.
True, still in the process.
And the process itself, while I did a great job bringing in a lot of the community members, I don't feel like from the beginning, and P&Z and CDA have heard me say this for months, if you don't ask the right questions, you're not going to get the right information. You know, the online survey asked if people wanted density or urban sprawl. Like those are the only two possibilities. So people voted for density because urban sprawl sounds terrible, but there are other options. But when we sort of ran with the whole density component, and they built houses everywhere, and then we asked the question, where are these people going to work? And what do you mean? These people need jobs. You're going to drive them all up to Aspen every day? So we did get some mixed use and some live-work stuff at Southside and some other places, but I think that those questions are really important. How many cars do you want to put on the highway? Where are people going to park in Basalt? How many people can the trails and the rivers sustain? On the big parcels, we were given options that was, you know, I call large and medium. And in each of the three, except for Clark's, on each of the three, the majority of people picked medium. What would have happened if small was an option for the public? We don't know because we didn't ask. So I have a hard time, you know, voting on medium since that was the majority of the people, but we don't know if they wanted something even smaller than that because we didn't ask. So I can't support the plan as it is because I don't think we asked the right questions.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. Gino?
I agree pretty much with my colleagues. I think the master plan is a very strong product for us, for the whole town, the community, the council. For the first time, I really believe, I've been on this planning and zoning for 7, 8 years now, we really have the people understanding what's going on and where it is and how it was being, and the fact that they were able to communicate. And again, as Heather and others have said, not everyone agreed with every point, but it really didn't matter in the long run because I believe that this document will give us a guide. It will give us an understanding of what the size of we're going to remain and all of the good things that we've talked about. But the people in general really feel good, and they feel that they've been asked the questions, and they don't feel that they've been asked many questions in the past. And just talking to neighbors and people and all sorts, from having spent almost a whole year now in delving into this and being a part of the program, I think that our community is well fed for it.
Thanks, Gino.
Thanks, Gino. Bernie, do you have anything to add?
No, it's a group process, give and take. It's a give and take group process. I think we have a good product. We're recommending it to the council. Council has many, sometimes conflicting goals and objectives that you need to achieve, and you need to weigh what we presented in the public process against what your vision of what the town will be in the future, and I look forward to that.
Thanks, Bernie. I have a question, Susan. We have 10 minutes. Did
Yeah.
you have in mind that we would weigh in now, or?
Well,
we
it
would
was, I mean, maybe if
recap
everybody,
this?
well, we have this on, like every coming agenda, we reserve some time for the council to, you know, provide input, but I think if there's particularly something that you wanna talk about more at your next meeting, which would be on the 28th, I think that would be helpful, or if people have like a couple quick comments, and then maybe we'll deal with the schedule separately,
Susan,
because we only have
It would
10
help
minutes.
us out a lot if we could hear from
Yeah.
council and get their sense, so
Okay,
yes.
I
it would
think
help
we
us
can
out.
do a couple of quick comments, but just logistically, if we don't get out of here at a quarter till, we're not back in for kickoff. So I hate to do that because this always feels wrong, and maybe I could ask that, depending on what the council says, we could recap, you know how sometimes in an application process, you go through and say, let's talk about this chunk, because I think several chunks have come up for us. I think that these folks have brought them up. I think the Meyer family has brought some things up. So, I mean, I know how this goes. If it's a long time till we talk about it again, we're all like, where were we on that? So, if we could get some help on that. But in the meantime, quick comments from whoever wants to make them. Yes?
Sure. So I'm most curious about process now going forward. We have this thing, there's some open issues. There are priorities in terms of parcels, and also there are open questions like Meyer. There are voted priorities. What do we do with that? So my question is, what does it look like moving forward in terms of how P&Z and then council pushes on this thing to massage it into shape? It's not my sense this is a final product yet, and there's some good points that have been brought up. So what does that look like, and how much flex is there in modifying it?
So let's not answer, does that work? Not answer the question, we'll talk about that as one of the items.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So we're kind of like bringing up items to bring back. Bill?
Sure. I, again, want to thank you guys for all the hard work, but I also would frankly like to cut to the chase and suggest that we have more than the time that is afforded to us in this town council meeting and any other town council meeting, because it isn't enough for me to defend this product that proposes a doubling of the number of housing units in our town. And we, as council, are going to have to defend this master plan, which is proposing a very significant increase, even under the modest density formula. And that also means understanding many of the assumptions. We are making assumptions in many of the proposals about the expenditure of public funds. I don't know that we can assume these things. This gets to Jackie's question about taxation. Are people going to be willing to be taxed $25 million to build an underpass? And if they understand the stark reality for them, I don't know what they will say. I also wonder about the assumptions that we make about the volition of the private sector. And this is either the current owners on the Clark's Market parcel, that Basalt Center City. In the highly dense configuration, we're making assumptions about what Aspinalt and what the private owners of the 3 cabins may want to do, and I would extend this basic argument to the Myers and the construction of a trail through your property. We have made assumptions about your volition, and I would frankly like to seek legal counsel on our rights, because it strikes me that, Jeff, this might constitute a taking, and we will need to address this. So I frankly do not feel equipped to respond, to defend, or in any way comment even on this, with the very basic questions that I have about the import and how we would ultimately implement this, and what it means in terms of prescription for future action.
Katie?
On the schedule, is there another P&Z joint meeting with us?
Right now there isn't, but we can.
I think that would be really helpful, because I think we need to get together collectively and talk about a lot of these issues. I mean, Bill kind of hit a lot of things, but when you look at that build-out graph, that's pretty mind-blowing, and the public needs to understand how massive and how that then trickles down to schools, roads, resources, when we're talking about doubling housing units, which actually means tripling or more of our population. Then I also want to just discuss, like, I would just call it more like being presumptive about land use that we don't own, and I feel like that's like, it's like an understanding that's how master planning is done, but to have like the Myers voice, like tonight I learned so much, and like, I feel like on both sides, it's like sometimes a development project will come and citizens don't feel like they have any control about what happens in their backyard. And now we're kind of hearing the other side, and that is citizens are telling private landowners what they can do on their land. And I think that's an interesting conversation that we need to continue having. And I would love to have it with the P&Z.
Thanks, Katie. Do you have additional?
No, I would like to dive more deep into the Myers property. I think that we're constricting them and forcing stuff into, an amazing piece of property that they've been great stewards to, and we need to respect them as private landowners that have already, like you said, given 40 acres to the town and respect some of their wishes. I mean, it's kind of ham-handed to me to just tell them that we have to do high density on the corner of their lot just because that's what we feel as a town. So, and I think also everything everyone else is saying. I mean, the growth numbers are kind of staggering when you put them in front of you, and it's and I'm meeting with P&Z. I think will help hash some of that out.
Thanks, Norman. Gary?
I mean, I think it would be a good idea to have a real good discussion with P&Z to really sit down and discuss the whole picture of it, because, the reality is I think through this master planning, we got very good feedback from the community about growth. But I think when you start adding up those numbers that potentially can be grown, it's staggering, and I am not going to support that. I didn't support it in 2007 to have that much, and I'm not going to support it now because I feel we really heard it from the community that they're really worried about the amount of growth that potentially can happen. I also saw that we want to try to find ways to, do some more density in town, redevelop some properties in town. I think that should be the priority. And, I respect the Myers and stuff like that, and I just don't see us needing to go out. No more sprawl. I don't think we need to go out at all. I mean, there's county land use codes and stuff like that. I really don't believe we need to go out. What we need to do is to really look at our town and where we are at now. And really, truly, I do really think that we should look at properties within town. I agree with Bill on some of these aspirational pieces. We should be looking at ways to incentivize the redevelopment in town, the redevelopment of properties that we deem really important that are right in our town. I am really worried about what's going to be in the Mid-Valley once, you start seeing all of those properties. Willits is not done. The tree farm is just getting going. That whole area is going to get much larger, much more crowded, much more dense. And so I'm looking for a master plan that incentivizes, sustainability within our town, not looking at any sprawl or anything that's outside our boundaries right now. I could see potentially some Jadwin talk, but I don't know. I look at trying to prioritize what we have in town, so.
Thanks, Gary. Jen?
I'd like to circle back to what we all started with, and that was an aspirational process. And if you remember how our faces lit up with the prospect of, let's do an aspirational master plan, and that's what is going to be presented to us. I need some more statements and options for creativity within our current urban growth boundary. I am very strict about not moving the urban growth boundary. The one exception was with the habitat and teacher county housing by the high school. And so I would like to see, going back to what Auden was saying, is how can we massage this, push-pull on it. I definitely need to see some more creativity, and that would include Rob's perspective and statement of provide us with a small option. The sizes that have been presented to us are medium and large. Show us some small options as well as those small options are likely going to reflect what we financially can afford, what we can bond for. So please provide us with that vision, that aspirational vision.
And I'll go quickly because we have run completely out of time. I agree with many of the statements that were made. I hate to repeat many of them. One thing I would like us to look at is when we talk about an underpass alleviating traffic, the underpass is the least of our problems. We are throwing more highway traffic, more 82 traffic. Everybody down Valley is throwing highway 82 traffic. And as always, I kind of would like to see what the implications are coming up Valley, because that's gonna be really, it's already, the problem is the Mid-Valley. Are we gonna make it worse, and are we not gonna count what's already happening? So I would like to see that. An annexation is a contract negotiation, so whatever happens with Myers family is gonna be, it's gonna be 50% on each side of the table. We are not, with a master plan, able to tell the Myers what to do, okay? And the rest of it, I think, pretty much was said. I think what Katie said is we need to also add in what are the impacts, financial impacts to our schools and other public services. And I will leave it at that. I think we've got a lot left to go. Many of us will not be here for that conversation, but I appreciate that the Myers came in. We are listening, and thank you so much. And we have to take a break. Thank you. Okay. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Almost everyone is here. We're gonna go for it.
How many meetings do we have in December?
Okay.
So I was wondering where those were, but
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to our meeting tonight and bringing all the award winners. This is pretty fun. Let's call the meeting to order at 6:06-ish, 6:05. And Pam, could we get a roll call, please?
Gary Tenenbaum.
Here.
Linda Fonte.
here.
Katie Schwer. Here. Auden Chandler.
Here.
Jennifer Riffle. Ryan Slack.
Here.
Jackie Whitsitt.
Here.
Thank you. The A team is present.
Ryan, would you like to read the Basalt is?
I would love to.
Okay.
Basalt is an inclusive, sustainable mountain community that boasts both historic charm and progressive vision. It is an engaging place to live, work, and play while offering an abundance of creative, professional, educational, and recreational outlets.
Thank you so much. Okay, so, the first item of information and fun is the January Students of the Month. So the way this works is teachers actually submit these students for these awards based on what they have seen happening in front of them. And I think they are probably the best guesser on who these great kids should be. So tonight's award is for fairness. And fairness means that the kids play by the rules, take turns and share, they're open-minded and listen to others, they do not take advantage of others, and they do not blame others carelessly. So the way we'll do this is we'll read the award winner's name, and they can just come up here, and the counselor will give them their accolades. Since you've got your mouth full, how about you, Auden?
Ready to go?
Yeah, ready to go.
Caroline. And Wing, even though we've worked together, I don't know how to pronounce this. Billison. Oh, it's so simple. Caroline, come on up. You can come all the way up.
I know he's scary.
He is scary.
Caroline is an incredibly responsible young lady. She's actively involved in extracurricular activities and participates fully in everything she does, like your mom. She is always punctual to school and turns her assignments in on time. Caroline brings positivity and joy to those around her. She's on top of her daily schedule and often reminds others and me of things that need to be done. She holds herself to the highest standards and strives to turn in classroom work that is not only complete, but work that she's proud of. She has outstanding time management skills, is always on task, and persists even when tasks are challenging. Caroline is thoughtful and considerate of her peers and often takes on additional responsibilities to help those around her and help our classroom run smoothly. This ability to self-regulate, assist others, and take responsibility for actions are excellent examples of personal responsibility. Caroline is an easy choice for a responsible student in 4th grade. Mrs. Hanson wrote that, and this is one of the longest ever read. So
It is.
Congratulations.
Yay! Caroline, would you like to shake everyone's hand up here? Because we would be pleased to meet
What an
you.
honor.
It's a
Congratulations.
very big honor to meet you. Thank you so much for all you do.
I'll give you a high five.
Yeah, I'm a high fiver. Way to go.
Yay! Jennifer, you wanna go?
Will Odalis Cruz Bonilla, Senior Odalis Cruz Bonilla is always respectful while others are talking and is a great listener. I can see this with the eye contact. She always follows rules and expectations, even when others ignore them. Odalis is a delight to teach and an enthusiastic learner. In addition, she never takes advantage of others. And, on the contrary, she is willing to help others even when they do not request it.
Wow.
She is fair-minded, a great learner, and a leader in class. She is a joy to work with. This is from Mrs. Martinez.
Way to go. Nice job. Bill Infante,
Sure.
do you want to go?
Absolutely, positively. I would love to honor and salute Francesca Lofaro. Francesca is being recognized for fairness, and Mr. Bravo writes, I nominate Francesca Lofaro for the Student of the Month. Francesca exhibits a great sense of rectitude and demonstrates excellent behavior in and out of the classroom. This includes being respectful to both teachers and peers. She plays by the rules, takes turns, shares, listens to others, and does not blame others inattentively. Congratulations, that all sounds familiar.
Excellent job. Good job. Thank you for coming in. Nice work. Woo! Gary, go.
Oh, I'd be happy to. Garrett Wolf. All right. So, I don't have a teacher's name on this one, but you'll have to think it's from one of them. You'll have to guess. So Garrett is very conscientious about doing things right and being fair. He treats others fairly and is inclusive of all people. Garrett has worked on how he approaches problems in order to communicate the need for fairness while also keeping a positive attitude and being patient. We are proud of his efforts and growth and the strict code of fairness that he believes in. Nice work. Nice work, dude.
Good job, man.
Good work.
Katie.
Okay. Hunter Raymond. Okay, this is written by Mrs. Mercer. I nominate Hunter Raymond for Student of the Month. Hunter shows the quality of fairness in many ways. First of all, Hunter is an excellent classmate. When assigned a partner, he is supportive, helpful, open-minded, and always listens. Hunter is a master at taking turns and sharing, as well as following the rules. Hunter is a team player in the classroom and is a true example of how to be fair. I am lucky to have him in my class. Awesome job.
Good work, Hunter.
Nice work.
Good job.
Good job, man.
Nice.
Slap, did you?
I have Manny Gomez. Manny Gomez is a great choice for Student of the Month award for fairness. I have him in my crew, and I've enjoyed getting to know him well these last 2 years. He is consistently humble, compassionate, and thoughtful. He has a good sense of humor and has earned the adoration of his friends and crew. He seems like he would be a good friend for kids his age to have because he's a positive outlook on things. Mr. Schaefer.
Good job. Keep it up.
And you have great hair, too.
I'm also envious.
Okay, Elise Thomason. Elise. No!
You got none.
You got none, really? Is there an extra one? No? Okay, well, everybody, congratulations. Thank you so much for coming down here, parents and kids, and for being the great citizens that you are in our schools. We're very proud of you. So, one last thing is you all are gonna get a pool pass for getting this award for this next coming summer. And you're also gonna get your photograph taken by one of our staff people out there in the lobby. So you can feel free to go out there right now if you want to, and we'll let you go so you don't have to stay here for this other stuff.
It's
It's an impressive turnout.
I guess I totally forgot to say all this. I forgot to thank, and I forgot to give, hey,
No, that's
Jeff.
for yours, isn't it?
oh, I guess nobody ever got it, okay. Okay, okay, thank you Grassroots for being here and for broadcasting our meeting live. People can watch tonight's meeting live or watch previous meetings on grassrootstv.org. Our videographer this evening is Shannon Buckner, and Shannon is doing a bang-up job every time she's here. Tomorrow, there's a mayor's coffee at Cece's, which is right across the street from here. You can feel free to come down and talk to myself and potentially the town manager, and once in a while, the police chief is there from 8 to 8:30 tomorrow morning. So let's see, so our next item is the consent agenda. And it's just the minutes from the last meeting. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Motion to approve consent agenda item 3A.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? And we have a call to the public, which is a time when folks can come up and make a comment to us, a concern, or any comment they want to, that's not on the agenda. Is there anyone here that wants to make a comment not on the agenda? No? I'm just looking at you because you're like the only person I don't know. Okey dokey, hearing none. We will move on. Mayor and council reports and comments. Mayor and council reports and comments. We've had a slow 5 weeks, I guess, on holiday. It's fine.
It wasn't slow.
Jen.
Gratitude for Public Works really working with the new water hog snow plowing situation in the Hill District. Thanks so much for staying on top of it, and some of your snow storage and pushing places may have, or not may, they disappeared. And so I'm just so grateful for staying on top of it and leaving a safe path to walk. And I recognize all of those efforts.
Thank you.
Yes. And then the other one I just reported to Ryan is love to get an update on Albany Pool, the winter cover. It's a new setup and it looks like it had a little issue. And so I want to be sure that we get to go swim in the spring.
My only one is kind of a NIMBY gratitude as well, and that is, and this has happened consistently for a long time now, is that Public Works always gets out on the Willits Trail, which is one of the only big public trails that we have out there, and it's the only way for people to safely walk down Willits Lane without walking in the middle of the road, and they are on it as soon or before they hit the streets, so they're putting pedestrians in front of cars. I love that. Any last? Nope. Okay, Brian Mahoney, do you have a manager's report today?
Just a couple of quick updates. So, you may have seen some activity down at the Whitewater Park. So the team is mobilizing into that area, so they'll be taking up parts of Fisherman Park, across the river for access, as well as in our little parking area there. The idea is that they're going to fix that in-channel wave feature, or improve it, is the goal, and then there will be some out of river improvements that will occur as well. So they're mobilizing in this week, and then they'll be starting basically through March 15th. It looks like for the river in-channel stuff, and then pulling out by April 30th. So that area will be closed to the public completely while they're under construction, and they have all their necessary permits and inputs there. And then secondly, just wanted to bring everybody's attention. The Wild subdivision did a big wildfire mitigation last fall, and they're going to be doing a controlled burn up in that area. Controlled burn in the town and within the town limits is pretty rare, but they have a big open space area that was cleared, and so there's really no practical way to get that stuff out, so they created slash piles. That will be a supervised burn. They'll get a permit through the fire district, and then Eric Lovegren, who's the wildfire expert that works for Eagle County will kind of be babysitting the fire. We expect that, they may, they'll pretty much burn up in a day. They may smolder a bit, but they're not real big piles. But at any rate, that's a positive for us to get rid of slash and make the town a bit safer. So what was the other thing? Oh, we'll make sure that we notify the public on that, put out some of our variable message boards, and then the EC alerts will also notify the public generally about that.
Quick question, how long can people take their Christmas trees to Albany Park?
I don't know the time frame on that, Susan. Do
Oh,
you know
Pam knows.
when it ends?
What we were told from Boyd was the end of January.
End of
Okay.
At least, and if it seemed like they were still coming in, they would probably extend it, but.
Okay.
Through the end of January anyway.
All right. So if you have your Christmas tree and you're still sitting on it, or in the yard like mine was, I had to uncover it, go ahead and take it down to Albany Park so that it goes where it's supposed to. Okay, presentations, an update on 2020 census outreach efforts. Watkins, are you here? Oh, I've been yelling and
Good evening, everybody.
Hi.
I'm here with Brian Meinhardt from the Census Bureau. And
He's
Kara-
the emailer, isn't he?
That's right.
You're getting them then.
And Kara Silbernagel, Special Projects Manager from Ficken County. So we have a presentation for you guys tonight, and the goal is going to be to fly through that, unless you guys tell me otherwise, to leave more time for questions.
Fly.
And so on. Kara and I sit on the Complete Count Committee, the Aspen to Parachute Complete Count Committee, and it's made up of, or funded by Pitkin County, Garfield, Eagle, City of Aspen, Snowmass, Basalt, Carbondale, Glenwood, and the Aspen Community Foundation. The goal is to get a complete count, have as high participation as we can in the valley, and thank you. She didn't yell at me this time.
You can yell Mike if you want to.
And the way we're going to do that is to focus on 5 populations that are traditionally hard to count populations, which are young children, seniors, seasonal workers, people who don't get mail delivery at home, and Latinos. And so generally how we're going to do that with all these populations and with everyone generally is to try to engender trust, dispel myths about the census, assuage fears about it, explain why it's important, and demonstrate that completing it is easy. And so more specifically, we have a host of ways that we're going to try to do that through an advertising campaign. We're going to try to do inserts and utility bills where we're allowed to, tabletop displays and things like that. Census Day is April 1st, but you can actually start responding to the census on March 12th. And so why is it important? I think I'm preaching to the choir here, but I'll list some examples here. Federal funding. We saw one estimate that for every person who's counted in the census, it's about $2,300 annually in federal funds for the region. You get a voice in government. Colorado has the potential to pick up a new representative in the House of Representatives. And then all kinds of important decisions are made with data, right? Data is very important, and so we want to have good data for our decisions. And so the key messages that we want to relay to everybody is that it's important for these reasons we just discussed. It's easy, only going to take about 10 minutes, and you can tell me if hopefully that's right.
That's correct.
Yeah. It's safe and 100% confidential, and it's not personal in the sense of you giving social security numbers or anything like that. So.
All right. So I gave this presentation about 3 hours ago, so excuse me if I might miss something. But it's easy, 10 questions, 10 minutes. One thing that came up, and Brian can correct, no more long form if people are used to that. It's one survey's going out, so 10 minutes, 10 questions. Number of people that are living at your house on April 1st, and some basic demographic information. So for the Aspen to Parachute complete count, we've really targeted some specific tactics for each population. So the first one, there we go, which I think is pretty innovative, is working with RE1. We've got coloring sheets and word puzzles that are going to be distributed out to the classrooms in advance of the census. There's going to be a census crew lesson and some Count Me stickers, as well as then working with other public schools on lessons given on Census Day. And then the Latinx population, we actually had a focus group that really drove a lot of these tactics, and so we're gonna work on videos on various partner agencies and their social platforms, such as Valley Settlement, Alpine Legal Services, working with the libraries and the programming that they're offering for after-school programs, English programming, some various events and locations where for commuters, advertising such as on RAFTA and various media outlets, grocery stores, and some speaker series. So for senior citizens, again, people are getting a lot more creative than I could ever get. We're going to utilize a singer-guitarist to do information at the lunch visits and do a musical presentation, which I think is pretty, I mean, I want to attend. Work with all the various human services programs up and down the region to spread the word on those as they receive those services, tabletop displays and posters at libraries. Seasonal workers, we have built a relationship with SkiCo HR and are using various marketing promotions internally throughout the SkiCo to reach those seasonal workers, as well as working with ACRA and the business owners that might have a huge seasonal population there. Temp agencies, working with the building permits and information packets for contractors so they can distribute to their employees, and then obviously the chambers up and down the region. And then the big one for this region is the no mailboxes. So those that are only have a P.O. box will not be receiving their invitation to complete the census in the mail. It will be on their door.
Hand delivered if we can, left on the door.
Okay. And so we're gonna do some mailings working with post office boxes and doing inserts there so people know how they will be receiving that invitation, and posters and potentially door knocking on low response areas. And then just generally working across all the different organizations that all of us can be the advocates for the census, what it is, how do we educate all of us, all the employees at all these various, whoever we interact with, of what is the census, why it's important, and why everyone should fill it out. So tomorrow, we are actually having a training for all the A2 Aspen to Parachute Complete Count committee members and our partners to participate in kind of a one-on-one training. So how you can help complete the census, don't forget that. And then be an ambassador, encourage family, friends, colleagues to do it, submit letters to the editors about why it's important and how it impacts you or your community, and then volunteering with the Aspen to Parachute Complete Count Committee. And with that, I will say a huge thank you to all the entities that have agreed to participate. This effort would not be reaching what it is if it wasn't for all of the jurisdictions coming together to bring this. And for Aspen Community Foundation to step up and be the fiscal agent, so we don't have to figure out an IGA between 12 different jurisdictions, because it would be Census 2030. So, and I'll hand it back over to Watkins.
Yep, we have a nice shiny website that just went live today. And then I wanted to touch on one kind of more local thing here, which is one of the challenges we have in the Western Slope and in the mountain region in general. I think some people don't get mail to their homes, so that makes it more challenging to tell people to participate. And so this is a map, screenshot that I took from the census's database about the purple show areas that get mail delivery to their home and will get the invitation to participate at their home. And so you see gray, like a lot of the Hill District and some kind of random places. If I can show you my mouse here, I'll try to. No, maybe no mouse.
Push the arrow button.
There
Oh,
it is.
yeah, somewhere.
Just the little hand motion.
So you see the Hill District, you know, a lot of that is going to have to be hand delivered. Also, some random areas. You see this little gray dot here? That's Arbor Park. I don't know why. Maybe Brian. Sorry. You know, little pockets of South Side too. So Basalt's more of a challenge than a big city would be to get a complete count, and that's part of why the Complete Count Committee is here, trying to educate people and trying to do everything that we can. So I think with that, happy to take any questions. Oh, there's one more thing I'd like to add. One other way that you can help is finding really concrete examples for us, if you can think of it now or email me later, of ways that the census kind of affects us, that we could use in messaging to help people convince them that it's important. You know, we've tried to be as specific as possible about, you know, for every person that doesn't fill out the census, we stand to lose X dollars in fire preparedness. Those numbers are hard to get, but if you guys can come up with that, we'd be happy to have them. So, that, any questions, discussion?
Questions? Anybody? Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
I might help later when I'm retired, like in a couple months. Anyway, this is.
You can do
this
it
is-
now, we could definitely use you.
All right. I guess the one question I was wondering is if there's any benefit statements for Latinos, like you should want to do this because.
We've one of the things we've talked about in the focus group is talking about children. You know, this helps your kids because it helps school funding.
Okay, that's good. That's good enough.
And trying to dispel the myths about it. You know,
For sure.
it's not going to be shared with any governmental agency at all. So that to try to take the fear out of it also, but not just focus on the fear.
Well, I think luckily we have police presence that's non-threatening, and I don't think people necessarily feel like anyone's out to get them on INS issues.
Is there some document that says here's how we can volunteer? Because we share that, maybe we could share that with everyone at SKICO. We could put it on the website, because there are a lot of people that probably sign up.
So maybe Watkins can get us something, just
Yeah.
so we're not like sitting here trying to write and figure
Yeah.
this out, but if you could just get us something.
Sure.
I mean, I could respond directly to your emails that I get so many of.
Hopefully not too many.
So, yeah.
And I want to, is the census, is it mail-in or is it person-to-person only?
So it's going to be a little bit of both. As Watkins was pointing out, we've got a couple of different operations that we do to deliver. We use the term invitation to respond because for the first time ever in 2020, you're going to have the option to do it online. So rather than saying questionnaire, and this is one of the things that we'll try and differentiate, that we definitely need some help in getting the word out there. As he pointed out, if you think back to the reason why we do a census in the first place, it's for congressional apportionment. So we need to know how many people there are, but we also need to know where they are. P.O. boxes don't necessarily correlate to an actual address. That's why we don't send the invitation via P.O. box. We know where those addresses are. We just can't mail it to that individual or that resident, so we hand deliver it. Those are called the update leave areas, and on this map that we pointed out, we actually have online, if you want to check it out, it's if you Google Census TEA Viewer, it stands for type of enumeration area. You can actually see a map very similar to this one, where it'll tell you which areas are in hand delivery and which ones are in the mail delivery aspect of that. But,
And then the ones that are hand-delivered, are they multilingual?
On this one that he's got up here, this is that mail strategies viewer, which is very similar that we've got. We do have some areas in Eagle County that are going to get bilingual. Basalt's not one of them. It's not that we don't recognize there are a large number of Spanish speakers here. It's just there's a threshold that goes out. But what we do have is language assistance on the online option and over the phone in English plus 12 different languages. So when you go on to the portal to complete the questionnaire with the click of a button, you can translate the entire thing into Spanish, Korean, Vietnamese, Russian, Arabic, French. There's quite a few different languages on there. And then when we do get to, if somebody's primary language is not one of those 13, when we get to what we call our non-response follow-up, which will begin in early May, our enumerators would be equipped with flashcards that have language assistance in 59 different languages.
They're really thought through.
Yeah, and to follow up with that too, I think it's accurate. I think we looked at the map viewer and that no area in the Aspen to Parachute region is going to get bilingual failings. So that's one of the ways that we're trying to step in with the Complete Count Committee to do that, because we know that there are some families that will benefit from that.
And just to tag on, the other piece that's important is no one will get an invitation that has the option initially to fill out the paper form. So with connectivity, we're also looking at ways that not everyone obviously in this region is connected. And we'll have stations set up and down as well.
Some people will. So that's another one of those with that. If you get a hand delivery, the update leave, those will include a paper questionnaire.
Okay.
This one up here, it's actually a good slide to take a look at. There are some areas that we've got that will get a mail delivery that also have a paper questionnaire. This one shows that Basalt is in what's called Internet First, which means that you will not receive a paper questionnaire. And this is another one of those aspects that the Complete Count Committee is helping us out with, to let folks know, don't necessarily look for a paper questionnaire, which is the way we've always done it. If you're in an Internet First, which is what this purple shaded area here is, you'll get the invitation to respond, which has directions on how to go to the website and enter the user ID that comes on that invitation and complete the questionnaire that way, and there will also be a phone number. That being said, in the areas that do get mail delivery, he's got, I think there was a previous slide where they had mentioned that we're going to send out reminder mailings. For folks that want to do a paper questionnaire, just because that's what they're used to, perfectly okay. You can't request one, but if you wait for that third reminder mailing that goes out, for folks that get it in the mail, we will include a paper questionnaire there. That'll go out in early April. So if that's somebody's preference, if they just hang tight for a few weeks, then they will eventually get a paper questionnaire. But if we do a hand delivery, you'll get one from the get-go.
Okay. Thank you so much, Brian, Kara, Watkins, for coming in. You can never tell elected officials too many times. Have a good evening.
You as well.
Thank you.
Okie dokie. How about ordinance 1, series of 2020? How exciting, Pamela.
Another decade.
Another one. An ordinance of the town of Basalt, amending chapter 4, article 8 of the Basalt Muni Code to eliminate the 1% art program. Ryan.
Yep. So, as you can see from my summary sheet, I just went ahead and put a little background on each of these 3 separate ordinances that we're really kind of couching as housekeeping ordinances. We'd received direction from council in the recent past to bring these back to you all for consideration of elimination. And so we're now doing that. And so this first one deals with the 1% for the arts, as you cited. And, I think that we've had a good concept here, but in practice, we haven't been consistent about collecting that 1% for the arts or charging ourselves for it. We also come into some issues when it deals with restricted funding and whether or not that restricted funding can really be put towards this effort. And then, I think one of the other issues that we have is each year, and I can say this over the last few years, as it relates to capital improvements, which this is tied to, we are cutting back on our capital improvements, not kind of like slashing our ability to kind of maintain the some of the deferred maintenance and things we have on buildings, roads, et cetera. And so to the extent we're not able to address that, doing this extra money is a sort of further delay. As a caveat to that, I think it's important to remember that we do have funding for the arts that's already built into the things we do. So we have 2 RETAs, real estate transfer assessments, that go toward some of our art programs, the ones that BPAC has been spearheading. So that's an ongoing effort for small grants. TACA is going to break ground this next year, and $1 million of their project is going to be coming from one of these RETAs. And so, if it were a conversation of not having resources, that's one thing. But in this instance, I think it's just something that's on the books that isn't being practiced. And so that in a nutshell is why we're bringing it to you.
Questions? Need motions?
Motion to approve ordinance number 1, series of 2020 on first reading and set the public hearing and second reading for January 28th, 2020.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, ordinance 2 of 2020, an ordinance of the town. It's him making noises. Amending chapter 2, Article 3, officers and employees of the Basalt Municipal Code to eliminate the personnel review board. Brian?
Yes, so this came out of a recommendation from our auditor from last year, and so again, a housekeeping follow-up item. But we've had this on the books for, as far as I can tell, for a number of years. This committee doesn't actually exist. It's probably a relic from the past, and I'm not sure if when we did our charter or prior, essentially we've delegated the authority of hiring, firing, and that sort of thing to the town manager. And so, you know, I think there's been a bit of an evolution over the last few decades of involvement by the town council in hiring practices, getting involved in personnel. And so, you know, because it doesn't exist and because, you know, we have a method for that as discussed in the charter, we would make the recommendation to go ahead and eliminate this as well, and, you know, follow up on that recommendation that the auditor had flagged for us at least.
Could you just say what the method is that's flagged in the charter?
Yeah, so it essentially says that, you know, you have this committee, and, you know, it's made up of town council and citizens.
So this is what's in the charter?
No, no, not in the charter, but in the
I
code.
want to know what's really in the charter.
Oh, so in the charter, basically, it gives, you know, delegated authority to the town manager for personnel, you know, practices. So hiring, firing, that type of thing.
What about appeals?
So there is an appeal procedure, and the appeal procedure can go to the town council, but not to this committee. I believe I'm correct about
I mean,
that.
I am just kind of curious about this. My background is HR, and I agree that elected officials have no business in this review board situation, but I did some just super quick internet research, and a lot of people do use like a jury of your peers, for lack of a better, as a PRB, and I'm just wondering if that was checked into at all, or what is our actual, what do we do? Because I think it's a fairness issue of not either being with the manager, who was probably the one who fired you, so you're not likely to appeal very successfully to the manager, or what?
I think
An
there's-
attorney is the next step generally.
Sure, and I think there's also, you know, Colorado's a right-to-work state, and so you can be, you know, fired without cause. And so to the extent you start to bring in a jury and give, you know, an individual, you know, an opportunity to appeal a case, and if it's folks that are community members that may not have specific training in, you know, HR or the law, then you run the risk of there being some sort of subjective, you know, like, oh gosh, but this person really needs
That's
a job.
not really how the ones worked in Pickton County or any place I've been, but I still want to hear just quickly, what do we have for an appeal process?
I would have to look into that further as to what the appeal process is. Off the top of my head, I'm not aware that there is an appeal process for an employee that's disciplined or terminated by the town manager.
Okay, well, the argument is that, and I'm not going to belabor this because I think the way it exists now shouldn't be there, but I think that the argument is that if you have nowhere for them to appeal to internally, and normally it's peer review, the only step they have is to get an attorney and sue you. There's no medium thing, and then you can't even say to the jury or whatever, oh yeah, there was an internal process for appeal. So anyway, I'm more curious about it than anything, but for tonight, I
If I
think
could add one more thing, within the employee handbook, there's provisions that relate to employee discipline and suspension. Within the code, there's also that to, but I
If you
don't
could just
believe
shoot
that there
me.
was anything related to an appeal. I can bring
No
that back for you
appeal.
for second reading.
Can I make a note too?
Yes.
We're looking at modifying our employee handbook as well later in the year, so there's other methods that we could do to research that, or if there was something needed.
I think it would be a good idea just to take a quick look, you know, and if the trend is just don't do it, just don't give anybody an option to have an appeal, then that's what it is. That's all.
I'll plan on bringing back more information on that for second reading.
Perfect. Other questions or motions?
Mayor, I move the town council approve ordinance number 2, series of 2020 on first reading and set public hearing and second reading for January 28th, 2020.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? What are you laughing about, Katie? Schwerer?
Because you said, can you just shoot me?
Can you just shoot me?
Sorry, it was, you didn't finish your sentence.
Can't you just shoot me now? So I can be early retired? Ordinance 3, a series of 2020, an ordinance of the town amending Chapter 1, Article 4, general penalty of the municipal code to conform with penalty provisions in state law. Ryan.
Jeff, you want to
Sure.
jump on this one?
The state code changed so that the maximum penalty for misdemeanor violations is 364 days instead of a year. Any violation of the code, it says now is, you know, with punishment by imprisonment of up to a year, and now it's changed to 364 days. I think the policy reason for that was that on a federal level, there's a potential for, there is a potential for deportation if you've ever been convicted of a crime that faces a punishment of 1 year, potentially of 1 year or more. So this was a way to kind of avoid that scenario, is I think the policy reason. So this is a cleanup thing in our code.
Questions, anybody?
Mayor, I move that the town council approve ordinance number 3, series of 2020 on first reading and set the public hearing and second reading for January 28th, 2020.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Brian. Jeff. Okay, update and discussion on recycle opportunities. Ooh, goody. Let's see, who's doing this one? Who is doing this one?
Susan and I will tag team this one a bit. So just to give you a little bit of background, the recycle center that's existed over off of Willets Lane for the last several years and was funded in part through Picken County and then in part through the town of Basalt to the tune of $30,000 apiece, has had its funding taken away by Picken County. Picken County's gone a different direction with how they're dealing with recycling, and they're requiring all of the those that get trash service to also have recycling included in the base fee. So essentially that provides recycling throughout the county. So that left the town with a recycling center without the funds to continue. As we began to look into it, that initial $60,000 price tag for the year 2020 doubled to $120,000. We've done some deep dives and conversations with trash providers, and what we're finding is that the cost of recycling is going up exponentially. We've had some people raise an eyebrow at the $120,000 mark, wondering how that's possible. And so while we may get into the $120,000 for next year, we A, have the issue on how do you fund it, but then B, the following year and subsequent years, it could just continue to go up, and we kind of find ourselves back in this same conundrum. So we've been speaking with Eagle County about this issue, and have worked with them basically to try to come up with some solutions and kind of discuss and bring back to this council, you know, what is the local government's role in recycling? You know, the service is available to everybody in the valley, but at their own expense, of course. So I did make some phone calls to different companies, and Waste Management was one, and I got a quote from them. It's about $35 a month for trash and recycling. And that would include a bi-weekly pickup for recycling. I did, I just kind of used Missouri Heights as a kind of far off place, like, hey, do you serve up in this rural area? And they did, as well as in the town. And so, you know, that's a cost there. Mountain Waste and Recycling, they're about $20 or so for recycling per month if you were to sign up today in town, and about $24 up in Missouri Heights if you were to sign up today. They did give me a caveat that some people pay more or less, and there's a sort of an odd thing that some folks that have been with them forever and ever got in at a different price and just pay that price. It's in fact a bit higher than the $20, but that would be a good go by for today. And that's a weekly pickup there. And then lastly, Valley Waste and Solutions. They have a few different options to size up or down your trash, and then therefore your recycling, which is included, is either more expensive or less expensive. So they go by about $40 a month if you're in Missouri Heights for a big 96-gallon container, and about $18 a month for a 32-gallon trash container, and then the associated recycling. And so, so all in all, what I was doing with this exercise is really trying to figure out, should this recycling center not exist, what does the community have as options to be able to continue recycling? And so, so that just gives you, a little bit of background there. I also did talk to one, hauler to try to find out a little bit more, and I think we've talked about it. What's going on with the recycling? And I think, as it was stated to me, it's kind of a geopolitical issue. We're seeing where we used to take a lot of recyclables, particularly plastic, overseas. A lot of those opportunities are now gone, and so those plastics are staying stateside. Apparently, there's really only a viable market for plastics 1 and 2, and then the 3 through 7 don't have much marketability right now. And so what happens to those? I don't have a definitive answer, but I think in some cases they don't end up getting recycled, or they get stored in hopes that those commodities come back over time. So, essentially, the other thing too, just to quickly mention, is glass. Glass is something that also, apparently, I've heard some conflicting stories on this, that Coors takes a lot of glass, but also heard that a lot of the glass doesn't get recycled. They actually crush it down and use it as a land application, as a cover on the landfills. And what happens in the MRFs, which are the materials, materials recovery facilities, any broken glass, anything about the size of a deck of cards on the conveyor belt gets shook out and falls to the floor, and all that stuff gets landfilled. It's seen as being a contaminant. And so glass, should it be broken glass, isn't going to find its way to being recycled. So those were just two examples of things we're facing with the recycling world. Also, last year, what I found out was running trash versus recycling, and this isn't a reason not to recycle. It's just a fact on the cost. So this company can run their trash service for about $93 per ton to be able to go collect it, staff it, landfill it, pay tipping fees. It's about 4 times that, or $400, to collect the recyclables, transport them, pay the tipping fees. They've seen a 90% increase in tipping fees in 1 year from what they were paying last year when they transport these to Denver. So a lot of our recyclables are getting taken to Denver, and they get to go to the MRF there. So that's some of the information that we have so far. And that's kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. As I said, we have been working with Eagle County because they're a willing player in this. As some of you know, Eagle County does provide recycling services over in the Eagle River Valley. When we looked at costs, because we did have some conversations about this, you know, they're hauling facilities in Walcott, so it's kind of central to each of those locations. We got numbers that, you know, essentially if for them to do the same service over here, you know, we would be looking at sort of the cumulative cost for that entire valley for one site here, somewhere in that ballpark. The other issue is they don't have a site. So you've got to build a site. You probably have to hire a person to manage that site, and then you also have the cost of hauling. And the numbers for hauling just to get from Basalt to Walcott far exceeded that number that we got from Waste Management. As far as the 120,000, it was more on the 200,000 a year to get it over there to their MRF. So what do we do with this information? You know, I think where I was going to have Susan just kind of discuss, you know, we brought this issue to the green team, got some feedback from them. You know, we're working within, you know, we have budgeted for this year $30,000. The decent majority, about 70% or so of Basalt residents are receive recycling services today, is a kind of a generic estimation. We thought that as, you know, one strategy for, you know, how the government can be most effective to do some diversions from the landfill is to look at those hard to recycle type of products and really kind of bolstering up those programs in, you know, not just once a year, but several times throughout the year for, you know, things like batteries, for things like paints, drugs, which we do now already, tires, lawn clippings, yard clippings. You know, we can expand on some of our fire mitigation that way as well. And then the other thing to keep in mind through all of this is similar to what we have over here on Willets Lane, we also have a landfill that will take your recyclables for free. So it's a little bit further if you're a Basalt resident, but you can go up to the landfill today, bring them your consolidated recyclables, and it doesn't cost you anything. So, and we believe that that's the same for South Canyon, which for Basalt residents is a little further out of the way. But nonetheless, Susan, do you want to talk a little bit about what Green Team had come up with?
Sure. Our normal Green Team meeting was yesterday, and we did a check-in with the Green Team, kind of related what we had in the budget, and they were really disappointed about the additional costs. But in the end, they thought that the $120,000 that we would potentially send for recycling, they'd rather spend on other programs. So they would rather, you know, do the cold climate heat pump. They'd rather convert buildings to electricity. And so they kind of stayed with their existing program, which was to do the start an experimental lawn waste this summer and an e-waste event, and to participate with Eagle County and also to work on education. So that they kind of really stayed where they were, but they were really disappointed in the additional costs. It was just kind of a reality. Just kind of adding one thing on the landfill, Pickett County landfill, is they don't check to see if you're a Pickett County resident or an Eagle County resident or a Garfield County resident. So I thought that was really encouraging, and James didn't think that in South Canyon that they check either in terms of it's open to all. The other thing that was kind of interesting news is just that $120,000 is likely to go up. So we had asked them, that's $10,000 a month. That's where you get the $120,000, and so they were looking to see, well, how much recycling is actually coming in? Could they reduce it? And they found that the last usage of the facility is so much higher than it was. And it's higher, we think, because they closed Redstone and Aspen, really narrowed down what they take at their facility. And also just because the increased costs, some of the HOAs have determined not to pick up recycling. And so it's likely to be more than the 120.
Well, staff has done a great job of looking deeper into this because, at first blush, it sounds like, well, why can't we just step up to the plate? But it's kind of disheartening to think that a lot of this really isn't happening, even if you pay for it to happen. It's still not going to happen. So, I mean, I would say unless somebody has another direction, I think just keep doing what you're doing. I think this is the right direction. It sounds like the decision's been made that we're not going to ante up, and that's, yeah.
Is there a way in which we can shift this conversation? Because there's so much information that's happening, and it's pretty rapid for everyone to kind of like make the changes. But one place that I think that we can make a positive impact is encouraging compost. And I pay $18 a month, and I divert virtually all of my trash into a compost bucket that's picked up once a month. If there's a way we can do some type of education, encourage people to compost, it massively reduces trash. So there's one thing. And I know that Pickens County has their scraps program, so I don't know if they'd be willing to partner with us so that it could be even less expensive. But having the conversation about it would be a huge step forward in terms of like climate initiatives, and the Pickens County dump doesn't need anything else dumped there, and they already have a program. So if we could start integrating that into this conversation as a waste diversion option, because it seems like, based on the numbers that you're coming up with, people really want to find a way to reduce their trash. But as we're learning, there really isn't, like you were just saying, like you can try, but it doesn't matter, it's still gonna go in the dump. But compost is something that actually won't go to the dump, and it becomes soil.
And just to dovetail on that, maybe, I know that the green team got limited resources, but maybe just considering something like ongoing workshops where we could get people in to say, this is the best we can do on this issue, and this is this is something that's the best you could do on going electric. I mean, just, to get more education, get people in here to be educated, because some of these things we don't know until we hear it like now and go, damn, that sucks. So, I mean, that's another thought. See if they're interested in doing something like that. Yeah, Jen.
And then same thing with gaining all of this new information is disseminating it to the public. So this is a fantastic newspaper article. This is a great partnership with the existing trash haulers that you did outreach to, possibly Town of Basalt. Granted, it's another piece of paper that can be composted, but maybe we can include something in their mailer that says, dear resident, here are your options.
Electronic Facebook. Okay, Bill, I think was next.
Yeah, just a quick comment. In Todd's article, he mentioned a guy named Mark Hoblitz, who I mentioned, or who I met, I guess probably in December. He had a bunch of views about the market dynamics and what is compostable, or I'm sorry, what is recyclable, what's not, and so on. And he might be worth reaching out to, simply because he also mentioned two guys who set off and have established an independent waste recycling function. And so this sounds like private entrepreneurs who are trying to break into the big guys market. I don't know very much about that, but I can follow up with him and see what he says. But I was also curious, who owns the land on which the current recycling facility is located?
Waste Management, I believe.
They do own it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, I think we could sit here and have ideas all night, but maybe you can swirl this around further with just what you've heard here and see if there's any more we can do, speaker bureaus, whatever, to get a little bit more visibility to the green side of our climate emergency. I mean, where is the emergency in our climate emergency? Okay, so, thank you. Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
I would like to add too on what Katie's talking about on composting, because I do think it diverts an insane amount of trash. Like, I don't even have trash pickups, that's why I'm sad that this recycling center is going away. But could we have the green team look into, or as the town look into town-wide composting? Is that something that we can initiate?
We could, we probably couldn't subsidize it.
Yeah.
But, you know, as a, you know, an offering or something along
Yeah.
those lines, or at least, you know, trying to get the word out on, you know, the benefits of composting and here's how you do it and,
Yeah,
you know,
just
here's,
somehow encourage it
Yeah.
on a town-wide basis and see if
Yep.
we could get more people to sign up for it, because
Yeah.
it does.
That's great.
I think that's
I mean, I
viable.
think these ideas are so great, so.
One of the things
Let's-
that Susan touched on and what you guys are all saying is the communication piece of this and the education piece of it is really paramount to continuing the conversation, finding, you know, some resolutions in this. And I think that's what we heard from Green Team. And so being able to put our you know, efforts into that, it'll be interesting to see like what kind of results you can get out of that, so.
I mean, I think, to me, the reduction of waste should really be our big goal. And understanding that, you know, what you buy and what you do is the biggest issue, because the composting thing is enormous.
Yeah.
And truly, I'd just like to look at as a town as ways to incentivize that. And, you know, just making sure that we're working with City Market and others that, you know, trying to find ways to reduce the amount of stuff people are buying that end up throwing out.
Yeah.
So,
Another speaker bureau thing, I think, honestly. So,
I'll incentivize it. I'm
Yes.
looking for ways to, using some of the Green Team money to help incentivize people to compost, to, you know, could we do a single hauler compost? Could we,
yeah,
because
for
then you
sure.
can get a good deal from one of the haulers and people can then sign up for composting at a cheaper rate and it's provided through that. I just wanna find ways to do that because reduction of waste is really the key. And it's not about just finding a new use for recyclable stuff.
I think it's one of those things where if you even know how, so once again, the education part is like, I think a lot of people may not realize what a big impact. So, okay to move on?
Can I just say one more thing that are along the lines of what Gary's talking about that we heard, and I don't necessarily have data on this, but we, you know, I think it's evident in what the information we do have is if we can reduce the actual waste, whether that's plastics or glass or food products, that has a big impact overall. Our issue and what we can maybe focus on as a rural community is so much more of the composting, because you can kind of do all of that locally, whereas the recycling, as we're seeing, none of that really happens locally. You know, it's getting trucked to Denver and then it's going on, you know, big trucks or ships or whatever to its final destination. And so to the extent you can make the biggest impact on that reduction piece by doing it locally, I think we get, you know, that's a win.
Okay, let's start. Let's do something. I love it.
Compost is the answer.
One of
It happens.
Well, it is one.
It's the only one. It
Okay.
solves everything.
So,
I like simple.
Okay.
So,
is this a different, was that first one a resolution or was that
Yes.
something else? Hold on. Oh, that was an ordinance. Okay. Resolution number 1 of 2020, a resolution of the town of Basalt designating the places for posting of public notices. Is that gonna be Pam, I wonder?
No, that'll be history.
Okay, all right.
Open meetings law requires the town designate the place where it will post public notices. It requires that you do that on an annual basis at the first meeting of the calendar year. This is our first meeting of the calendar year. So the resolution designates that the primary place for posting public notices is the town's website. And secondarily, if it's unable to be posted to the website, it will be on the entryway to town hall.
Okay. Questions, thoughts, motions?
Motion to approve resolution number 1, series of 2020.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, golly, I guess there's a potential executive session here, if that's still in order.
Mayor, I move that the
Thank
town
you.
council enter executive session for a conference with the town attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions in accordance with CRS 24-6-024B. More specifically, an update on a court notice related to Michael Scanlon.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are in executive session. We just need to wait for
Need to shut down.
our